Welcome, AMCO, to Tech Time.
Today we're going to be discussing servicing the RE5R05A TCM. And a question that come up when considering the information for this presentation, is it for me or is it not for me? So as we go over these details, we want you to make that decision, whether you're a tech, a CSM, or a manager listening in, because it's from field tech calls that we get is the reason we create these tech times. It's to help you, but typically they're brought on by calls that originate on our hotline. So first of all, we want to consider, what do we know about the RE5 TCM? It is an internal TCM. That's not a big deal, right? We're seeing those on TECMs and a lot of units nowadays. But the information, the foresight about the more we know about this thing, and in your particular vehicle's case, what we know about it before we condemn it to needing built and pulling it out of the vehicle, we want to gather codes and things like that, and you'll see the benefit as we get into the technical information. Also, the factors that go into determining whether this approach is right for your center or not is considering things like warranty and the cost factor. And when it comes down to actually repairing or servicing these, they have internal circuit issues that need to be inspected for, and also sensitive microelectronics that need to be dealt with in a sensible way. What else do we know about it? Well, the solenoids are individual. Unlike some of the TCM assemblies used in other units, they are individual, they are available, they must be removed to inspect the TCM. You see them on the bottom of the screen. We'll talk more about those in just a minute. They're easy to break, and the cost on those solenoids is about $100 a piece. So when you're considering and weighing the cost of whether this is right or not for your center, keep that thought in mind. And the cost of an OEM TCM or reman assembly is typically around $1,000 and carries a 1-year warranty. And Infinity applications can run anywhere from $1,400 to $1,700. So other factors to keep in mind. So for anyone, you or anyone faced with an RE5 in your center for transmission-related repairs, you have 3 options. And the first of those we'll consider is to do nothing to it or reuse the original. And that seems like the cheapest option, right? You do nothing, it costs nothing. The old phrase, didn't take me no time. Maybe you don't have that phrase in your center, hopefully you don't. But time is always measurable, and the time that we spend pulling a unit back out, battling the same old codes, same old issues, is time that costs us a lot of money. You may even hear the comment, we only spent a half a can of brake cleaner getting that TCM ready to go back in. Well, obviously this is the least desirable on a scale of 1 to 5. We'll give it a 1 because of the high risk of repeat codes and same issues. And if you do nothing, what tangible thing can you list on the invoice? You did nothing. So least desirable. The next option, using an OEM or reman. For some of you, this is the only option. Maybe you're a busy center. It's the most upfront cost. And speaking of downtime, it's one that might take anywhere from a day to 7 days or weeks, sometimes on Infinities. Reports indicate that with these units, a 25% failure rate sometimes is still experienced. So there's no guarantee that just because it's new is going to be problem-free. So bear that fact in mind as well. Also, these OEM units or reman units come blank, or they need to be reprogrammed or flashed with the vehicle data. It's definitely a tangible item, because if you're paying $1,000 for it or $1,700, I can rest assured you're going to put that on the ticket. But the profit isn't as much there. So again, all factors that need to be discussed from a technical aspect and a managerial aspect as well. We'll give this a 3 or 4 because, hey, it is new and it's got some reliability. Moderately desirable. Option 3, to inspect and or repair as necessary. Little to no upfront costs. You've got mostly time involved, an hour or 2, and after you get a few under your belt, 1 to 2 days you may be down if you have to have supplemental items, solenoids or such, still you could expect somewhere around a 25% failure, in the sense that you're not going to be able to rescue or save every TCM that you remove. You're just not going to do it. There's no need, however, to reprogram this when you're done, so that's a cost savings. It's definitely tangible. Would need to give a little thought to how you list this on a invoice, not to be misleading. You wouldn't want to put remanufactured. You might want to use the word service or something like that. And it's definitely some room here for profitability, considering all the factors. So I would rank this as highly desirable, maybe a 4 or 5 on this scale. Now, let's get into the technical reasons of why we even need to inspect these things over just reusing them. Contamination is the #1 reason that we need to do this, primarily glycol and water contamination. And I just want to mention here, there's other tech times, and there's a particular one by Jim Eberhardt in the AMCO University that deals with water and glycol detection. And the problem is some of the centers that spawned this discussion here on Tech Time did not think they had any glycol because it failed a glycol test, but it did prove to have water. In fact, the last slide, as we'll get to it, actually it was from a center that found a broke circuit, and we'll talk about that just in a minute. But this water and glycol contamination with friction material, and particularly metal, is all conductive and can cause issues in performance within this. The required equipment, nothing special. You have all this in your center. Torque wrench is recommended for putting the valve TCM back to the valve body. And electrical cleaner, we want to make sure that we're using an electrically approved cleaner, contact cleaner, and not just brake cleaner, or definitely not carburetor cleaner or something along those lines. Use anti-static practices, and most of all, most important thing is just patience. It doesn't take much to get through this. Well, let's jump right in. Here we have our TCM mounted to our valve body as you would pull it out of the vehicle. When you're removing these from the transmission, whether you're doing it in the vehicle or on the bench, you must remove the retaining clip here on the outside of the transmission case, a little U-clip. You pull that out, and what I like to do is gently push down on the top of this connector to get it started on its journey out of the case bore. And also you want to pay attention and make sure that the wiring harness isn't routed over or around the manual valve. So you have the solenoids numbered. We want to talk about what we have to do to remove those. Here we list the identifications for you, left to right: line pressure, TCC, direct clutch, front brake band, input clutch, the high-low reverse, and the low clutch brake. Now, you want to start, I recommend starting with the low coast brake clutch. It's different from all the others. Now, if you go into this unit for repair, and let's say you're experiencing a direct clutch, #3, and an input clutch solenoid error, and after inspecting it, you don't find any issue with any of that, could be a performance issue with that solenoid. So what you could do, since these 3, 5, and 6 are of similar design, you could swap those. And if your symptom tends to exemplify now a problem with that solenoid that you've got in a new home, just like you would do with a coil on checking for a misfire that's coil related, you can do the same with these solenoids, but only if you're gathering the information you need to before pulling it out. And here we have the solenoids. Bolts are removed, and again, you can feel all this contamination that's gathered on top of the valve body. And here are the solenoids with them removed. You'll notice now these are still in the order that they were. And I recommend, as you take these solenoids out of the body, that you lay them somewhere in the same order, so that if you want or have in mind of swapping some of the ones of similar design, you can do that. But if you'll notice here, 1, 2, and 4 are missing their snouts. That's right, they stayed in the valve body. This was one that had long exposure to glycol, and these O-rings will bind up in the bores of the valve body. So to pull these solenoids out, what you want to do, we listed good gripping pliers and the tools required. You want to grip the solenoid gently here on the top and pull straight up. You do not want to rock this thing from side to side, or you will break every one of these solenoids. And if you break too many of them, now you're back to a cost analysis of whether it was worth fixing or not. Just remember that when you're buying a new one from OEM, typically a core charge is not involved anymore, so if you have to throw this away, what have you lost? But consider what you have to gain by investigating this as a viable option. Now, can you imagine, thinking back about our first option, all of those times maybe some of you or other shops are just spraying the external side of this thing off and going back with it? Can you imagine the probability of having follow-up codes and issues with a valve body that has this much contamination in it? You can count on it. Here we have the TCM removed. This is the black cover that we will need to remove, and we'll show you how to do that. This is the upper side here. You see the input sensors, the speed sensors that actually use to generate gear ratio errors and that sort of thing. And flipping the TCM over, we've identified the 9 plastic retaining tabs that you'll need to release, and this is not a big deal. If you could consider this or imagine this being a door before you, these would be the hinges here in the red boxes, and these are the door knobs. So you would start with this doorknob, release it, and then you'd go to this one and just kind of come across this row and then here. And as you release these tabs, either with an assistant or an extra hand, you want to try to pull that cover away like a door and let it hinge. And these retaining tabs, you need to do nothing. They will release automatically as you open the door about 30%. So as you do that, that will come off. You just need to take care that you don't bend it too sharply. And I'll show you here. You don't want to bend these spaded terminals where the solenoids mount. So we'll go back up. Here's the pressure switches, and these are areas that you want to get cleaned out thoroughly with your electrical cleaner. You can also see these covers, the terminal connections here that need to be cleaned. And again, the electrical cleaner does a marvelous, safe job at doing that. And then here on the other side of the board with the cover removed, there is one remaining module strap held in with 2 Phillips screws. It's not necessary to remove it, but I recommend doing so because underneath that, nothing fussy, but it can collect in these little pockets. It can collect more of this mucus that if it makes its way across these terminals, you're going to have erratic and intermittent codes. Now, flipping back over to the bottom side of the PCM, we have 2 small covers that we need to remove. Here you see this one removed and this one in process. There's no retaining tabs on these. They just sort of snap over and snap shut. This particular model used no silicone sealant around the edge, but what I've made a practice of doing is using a industry electrical grade silicone to lay a bead across these terminals here. It's a preventative measure that would prevent metal or conductive water or glycol from ever getting back in there should that happen. But we know that anytime you have those contaminants in your transmission, you're going to have problems anyway. So it's, on one hand, not totally necessary, but certainly something to consider if you're using the proper information. Oh, and what's that? A tear in my eye. Kind of looks like a tear, doesn't it? Well, I can tell you, this valve body, if it was reused without cleaning, somebody would have some tears. So this glycol, this unit has been on the shelf for probably 6 months, but here's one little droplet. Now you think, how much water is okay in a transmission or in a TCM? Well, it only takes one little droplet right here to create a circuit code. So this is the reason, the main reason that we're recommending this as an option. Not one that's going to save you every unit that you see, but certainly one that we're using proper chemicals like the electronic cleaner available at any part store is certainly you're on the path to cleaning these. So again, these are the connections particularly that you want to get all this mucus off, and you should end up with something that where you can almost see the original solder holding these joints together. And again, these tech times are built around conversations that we have on the tech department with you every day. And in this last picture of the presentation, we're almost over, guys. this is a situation where a center calls in with an intermittent solenoid code. And what we were trying to understand is how could this be an issue, not be an issue cold after clearing the code and only come back when it gets hot. Well, these thin circuits that you'll be inspecting, and you want to take care to inspect, particularly on the outside edges where they meet the stated terminal, where the solenoid plugs in, you want to look at those, and particularly on this fourth from the left is one common to break, and it's most likely due to rubbing on the cover, but any of these are susceptible to it. But we'll discuss how to repair this in a future tech time. That is, if you want it. We certainly appreciate you joining in today. And if you'll notice here at the rear of the picture, this is a bead of silicone that was there to prevent contamination, particularly, well, there should never be contaminants in a transmission, but it would prevent this moisture and metal from getting into this area, causing potential problems. So keep all of these things in mind. We certainly hope you enjoyed this technical aspect of this, and look forward to seeing you again in the future.